You were robbed. Cartoon Network in 2019 would go on to premiere one of the best shows to unfortunately be condensed into a single season. It had action, it had adventure, it had amazing animation, it had comedy, it had amazing designs, it had amazing music, everything you could have asked for in an action comedy show. And even yet, not only was it cancelled with no fanfare, it was left on a cliffhanger. Today we explore Mao Mao Heroes of Pure Heart, but we're starting from the beginning. If you were to ask some, Mao Mao Heroes of Pure Heart is a show about a sheriff cat with his sassy and adorable partners protecting a land of sweetie pies from endless danger on all fronts. However, by the end of this video, you'll learn that Mao Mao is about something even greater. But who's behind this amazing story? The youngest of 9 siblings, Parker Simmons was born in 1986 into the world with a simple mantra: succeed or have nothing. A competitive family, he took note of how each of his siblings were talented in their own ways, and how he would often have to push for attention that was already quite strained before he existed.
I'm the 9th of 9 kids,
Whoa.
So there were a lot of us, and I had to fight for attention a lot. So that seemed like, that's kind of a natural fit for this line of work in general.
Kind of just slipping into art, it was something that he was not just curious about, but practically compelled to do. He'd recall being so bored with schoolwork that while he did pretty good academically, he'd still fall into the habit of making drawings on his worksheets, which his teachers did not enjoy.
So I spent a lot of time, you finish the worksheet. This is the thing I think I'm saying all the artists can relate to. You finish your worksheet, and what do? You flip it over and you start drawing on it. And then your teachers get mad at you. Does this happen anymore? I don't know. But they would get, how could you draw on this? I'm like, this has more value than this stupid thing you had me fill out. This is good now.
One of the earliest memories he'd have when it comes to creating things is creating a story about a pumpkin named Pump, where he had long legs and could run around. He'd use crinkled green construction paper, slapped a character on top, and showed his family. He'd speak highly of the support he got from practicing his art at a young age. However, he'd also speak about the pressures put on him and his family, particularly at a point in his parents' lives where they were drained from the energy they've given to his other siblings.
There were sort of different expectations for all of us, and I would say, by the time I came around, my parents were just drained as human beings. So it's like that they were still expectations, but there's way less time to pay attention to whatever it was I was doing. And also when you're the last, you're, the baby. So you have a lot more, room to just be a brat. And I got away with a lot of stuff. And, some of my siblings, I can't really speak for them, but some of them just, some of them took it well and were like, cool, pressure. All right, well then I'll be the best. And some of them were like, eek, pressure. I hate this. This is like screwing me up. And some of them were like, pressure, screw you.
This left the young Parker with a lot of leeway and not much direction. With the sole job he had being to keep high grades, little did he know his sister would give him what seemed like simple direction that would change his life forever.
I had good grades and stuff, and I thought, maybe I'll go into engineering or science or something, I don't know. But obviously all I did was draw all day. And one of my sisters was like, hey, go to art school. And I'm like, you can do that? There's a school for art? She's like, yeah, you have to leave here to do that. And I'm like, oh.
Attending the Art Institute of California at San Diego, he'd have a complicated relationship with school, often finding that while it served some purposes, he'd learn much more out of school than in school. In fact, oftentimes when speaking about the campus, he'd preface and highlight it being closed for fraud.
I went to the Art Institute of San Diego, and they are closed for fraud.
What I find so interesting about his time being there is that he really speaks about it the way that I would. There were a few cool classes, but a lot of it didn't really seem to matter or make an impact, and I learned much more on the job anyway. There's one big difference between our experiences though. Parker would speak about his teachers trying to unionize, and him learning this through a mentor would be very disappointing to learn that all of the teachers got fired. It was one of his earliest experiences of seeing an institution cast aside their lifeblood to protect the higher-ups' interests. This is what we'd like to call foreshadowing. Now you may wonder how going to an art school that closed for fraud, fired all the teachers who tried to unionize, and was more or less a waste of time would change his life forever. Well, at this time in his life, he'd describe it as spending every waking hour drawing, doodling, sketching, and even animating. His hand was constantly illustrating whatever came to mind. However, there was one class that blew his mind and was one of the first pieces that set into stage how Mao Mao became a show.
I learned to animate on paper.
Yeah. Oh, you used pieces of paper.
So I know, I
was gonna
know
ask
what
you
an
about
X sheet
that.
is. I know how to capture stuff on camera.
I was taking this, it was like a 3D character animation class, and my hand was constantly with a pencil to paper. It's compulsion. So I really wanted to do 2D animation. That's where my heart was. And I was in this, last semester, like I'm graduating soon. I'm in this character animation class, and he was a professional animator who was teaching us, which I always appreciated. And he pulled up his file, and he's like,
Yeah, you know what I like to do, kids, is I open up Flash
Oh,
and I start making a 2D rough version of what I'm going to animate.
Yeah.
And we had been deep into the class at this point. This is like a second level class learning 3D.
and I'm watching it, and I'm like, ha. And he's like, and then I create a new frame here, and I draw the character doing this, and I'm like, ha, ha.
And as soon as he opened that up and started drawing on individual keyframes, my eyes went really wide, and I almost walked out of the class and said, I quit school.
Yeah.
I'm good.
In my mind, I left the class at that moment. I left.
Yeah.
I ran out, and I was like, I didn't know you could do this.
I know how to
figured
animate
it
on
out.
paper, and this is the thing that gets the paper out of it. And I don't have to buy bullshit 12 field and come in on the weekends and capture, pounds worth of stuff out of my car.
I didn't know you could do this. I've been drawing on paper like an idiot and putting it underneath the camera. I could just traditionally animate and use Flash keyframes to act as keyframes.
I get to just draw crappy shit on the computer.
Yeah.
Nearing the end of college, he'd graduate with a Bachelor of Science, Media Arts, and Animation degree, but not be any closer to what he truly wanted to do. At this point, there wasn't a Mao Mao yet. However, there was a goal: money.
My primary concern when I got out of school, and for the longest time, was just making a living. That's all I ever wanted. I just want money so I could be alive. And also, I wanted to get married to my longtime girlfriend who had helped, just nurtured me as a human being for so long. And that was my next goal. I'm like, all right, we're going to do that. And I can't wait to buy her a ring and propose.
It's such a nasty word here on YouTube to say that you're doing anything for money, because it brings this connotation of people who are greedy or who don't care about the art of doing something. And I've always found this so odd, because a lot of the problems and goals I have in my life require money to fix or to achieve. Therefore, in some way, what I do has to be for money. For Parker, this was not just to survive, but to give back to his partner who's been by his side. At this point, he was struggling to find work despite having the skills and the drive. This appears to be around 2007 to 2008, and if you know anything about 2008, the economy was not good. Rather than lay down and accept the circumstances as is, he came up with a pretty blunt and straightforward game plan.
I remember watching TV and I'm like, which one of these can I work on? I was watching Metalocalypse and I'm like, okay, I'm gonna apply to that. And I did, and I had an interview, and they hired me purely because they had seen some of those really poor quality black and white animations I had done. And they were like, yeah, they're funny. They made us laugh, so you're hired.
And just like that, he got his foot in the door working on the Adult Swim hit TV show Metalocalypse, directed by a few people, but one of them being Chris Pryonsky, who will be very important in Parker's career, because this is where he would find not just his people, but his work family and his future.
Chirp.
It is a shame that some people will never find their passion. It's also a shame when some people will never find their people. Many of the people around us will struggle to find both, let alone one or the other. Parker has always described his relationship with Titmouse in the most positive way. He'd be very grateful for the experiences of working there, and I would wager that Mao Mao doesn't get off the ground without the experiences he had at Titmouse. Outside of Metalocalypse, he'd also cut his teeth working on a project called Baton, which he'd describe as soul-crushing, with some of his peers having it worse off than him.
I think just before that started, they put me on some other gig just so I could start earlier, and I was doing shading on a rotoscoped project for a Japanese film called Baton. Weird project and kind of soul-crushing, but a good fire to sort of be forged in.
Apparently, one of the only things panned from Baton was the animation, specifically the rotoscoping, the task that Parker lucked out of doing. Traditional rotoscoping animations such as Baton, produced by Shunji Iwai in 2009, and Flowers of Evil by Hirofumi Nagahama cannot avoid one problem. The animation is ugly. When Baton was rotoscoped by an American animation team, they had a poor recognition of Japanese faces. And the first problem was that the drawings were not like real people.
What was it? Was it Baton? What was the first thing you worked on over here?
That's exactly right. The first thing I worked on here.
That was a crazy gig, right? It was like a rotoscope movie for Japan. We were the overseas studio for Japan. We've done that like 3 or 4 times.
Don't talk shit about overseas until you've done it.
Yeah,
it's hard work.
Guys, we were the workhorse guys.
Hard work. I did shading on that. I didn't even get to do the roto, so I actually got off easy.
Nice.
Despite this, Parker would be one of the workhorses of Titmouse, being a part of several different projects including, but not limited to, BET's Black Panther, The Milk Chug, Bravest Warriors, DC Super Friends, the Hot in Cleveland animated special, Dawn vs. Wrath, and even OKKO, writing, storyboarding, and singing on the episode Let's Not Be Skeletons.
Well, you got problems. Problems right here in Lakewood. Yes, sir, you got barrelfuls of crime, and I tell you it ain't good. Cause you got a villain to come and fight, keep you up all hours of the night, and I tell you it's enough to make a fella feel unsafe.
But there's 2 jobs that he seemed to be very vocal about their influence. Motor City doesn't get spoken about when it comes to Disney animated television shows, however, it is quite the underrated Disney XD gem. Created by Chris Pryonsky, one of the co-founders of Titmouse and someone whom Parker has a great professional relationship with, this would be his breakout moment. Up to this point, he'd worked on several different projects, but his range of responsibilities increased tenfold since shading work on an overseas project.
I was on the pilot for Motor City before it went, and that was like a breakthrough moment for me because I was like, oh, this show looks too good, they won't let me on it. And then they did let me on it, and then they let me do a rig for this whole, like an entire character, and I'm like, they trust me.
He described the working environment as empowering. He and his peers felt a sense of ownership working on the show, and I'd imagine quite a bit of it was working with the Titmouse family and having that trust that everyone's input mattered. In fact, it was the trust that he had through Motor City that put him through one of his biggest challenges. Now, to be clear, it wasn't Turbo, but Parker did work on Turbo and had some feelings about it that would bubble up with an unnamed pilot. Back then, I was directing animation for Netflix's Turbo series, Simmons recalls. My friends and I were all in a place where we wanted more individual work, so when the opportunity came up, I started drawing stuff that I liked. Basically, the idea was to get the ideas up on the screen to see if they're funny, to see if the characters are interesting and does the story work. Although sounding like fun work, he'd actually describe the situation in the opposite way.
By the time we're working on Turbo, and this is no disrespect to Turbo, but it wasn't Motor City, and we didn't own it, and we didn't feel a sense of ownership, and so suddenly I'm in charge of a team of animators who I'm like, yeah, I know how to make these guys shine, but they didn't want to shine. They're like, this is, and they did, believe me, they did great work, but it's not the same.
Turbo was the opposite of Motor City. The sense of ownership in the work was non-existent. Now, I must preface the following by saying the following is a very risky thing to do as an animator within the industry. As Parker will go on to tell you, there is a way to carry yourself professionally, and the leap of faith he took in expressing himself in the following clip should not be taken as gospel or something to do. But at the same time, it should be acknowledged that the reaction his boss had to the following clip showcases the amount of trust and strong bond that he had with the Titmouse team.
I was working on a pilot, this is one that I won't name, and I remember being in a meeting with Chris P, who's the owner of the studio, and I remember sitting in that meeting, we're reviewing the footage, and he's happy with everything, and I'm just sort of sitting there, and I go, do we even want this show? And he goes, he's like, we need jobs. He's like, but he could have, if it were any other studio or any other boss, could have been like aghast, could have been like, I'm never working with that person again, or could have done any number of things because objectively that was an inappropriate sort of, politically speaking, you know, you don't say that, but it was just me and him, and we're artists talking to each other, and you know, most people who run a studio or run any other place would be like, I don't care if it's fun, just take the job. I'm paying you money, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Chris, and by extension Titmouse, listen to that. They're going to listen to that and say, yeah, okay, well, what can we do? Or, how do we make this rewarding? How do we incentivize X, Y, and Z? I don't know many other places or people that would do that, listen to that, entertain it, or ever work with someone like me again after I'm just like, do we even want this? This sucks.
If anything explains his relationship with Titmouse and the comfort he had, it would be this moment here. So to understand how this leads into Mao Mao, we have to talk about Titmouse's annual event for their art team. If you want to understand one of the big keys as to how Mao Mao comes to life, you need to understand what 5 Second Day is. Straight from the site itself, 5 Second Day is a long-standing annual Titmouse tradition where the studio gives its employees a paid day off to produce their own personal animated shorts. Participants are given complete creative autonomy and are encouraged to unleash whatever quirky, bizarre, and laugh-out ideas that have been brewing in their minds. The resulting shorts are then screened annually in cities where Titmouse has offices: Vancouver, New York City, and Los Angeles. Now, it should be noted that the short being 5 seconds isn't a requirement, with many artists going far past the mark. He'd work on several different shorts in many different capacities, including, but not limited to, creating one called Shamrock Shake in 2013.
Shamrock Shake! Shamrock Shake. Bit green, innit? Shamrock Shake, can you see? By McDonald's at night. Shamrock Shake.
Another one in 2016 called Rickman.
You dare enter the lair of Boss Man?
And even one called Animation in the future in 2023.
Okay, animate a butt shitting. Hanna-Barbera style, please. No, I did this last year.
Shamrock Shake would be the key to how Parker would be spending a lot of the latter half of the 2010s. His level of devotion towards the shorts is important to the story because we get the final piece of the puzzle here, and it doesn't come from Cartoon Network. It actually comes from Nickelodeon. As you've seen, I've built up the competitive family, drawing all the time, learning Flash in his last year of college, struggling financially, shooting his shot at Metalocalypse, meeting Chris P of Titmouse, developing a fantastic working relationship there, and the 5 Second Day event. Because these were the dominoes that need to be hit for this last one to truly make its mark. The last piece was an email from a Nickelodeon executive.
Hey, this is funny, and I saw your other stuff. Have you ever thought about pitching a show? And then I feel like my eyes just went blurry and I didn't look at the email anymore because I was like, I'm like, what is this person telling me? Can I do a show? Have I? And it was this weird sort of epiphany moment where I'm like, you know what? Yes. Maybe I could do, same thing as like go to art school. I'm like, I could do that? Should I try making a show? I could do that? Maybe I should try doing that. Because I think I'd asked myself that a million times before where I'm like, working on this show and this sucks. I should make something, and I'm like, I can't. I don't really have that. Turns out I could do that. Wait, yes, all the pieces are here now, and it all just kind of clicked, and I'm like, I can and I should. But it took years of effort. Mao Mao didn't just kind of appear out of nowhere. Like I had to, draw and come up with ideas and talk to friends and coworkers about it. All it took was one person saying, I think you should, not you can. That all has to come from within. But if that one person is like, I think you should, sometimes that's enough to say like, yeah, you're right, I really should. And then I just held on to that, and I never stopped working on it.
And just like that, Mao Mao was born.
Cut. It's a comedy, man. It's supposed to be funny.
Within the description of this video, it reads, Mao Mao is the hard-bitten sheriff of the Snuggleshire. He fights for supreme justice with the help of his deputies, Badgerclops, the most relaxed bear cyborg on the planet, and Adorabat, the undisputed master of cuteness. Here, the gang tries to shoot a commercial. I'll tell you what needs help, apparently the wiki article for this short. Let me read the plot section exactly how it's written. When Trio were starting to make semi-short, Mao Mao started it with been an epic short of sort until Badgerclops cutting it and saying that this was supposed to be a comedy and proposed to him to meow. All right, enough of that. My brain is struggling to understand how to read that. Let me tell you what happened in a clearer way. The short starts off with this dancing dude that Mao Mao slices into, specifically stabbing it in the eye, which causes the whole scene to explode. Badgerclops would call this behavior out, complaining that this is supposed to be a comedy, to which Mao Mao would defend himself, saying that stabbing people in the eye can be funny. Badgerclops would push Mao Mao to meow, like, in his words, a cute little kitty cat, to which Mao Mao would find this behavior underneath him. Adorabat would interject, offering to do it herself.
Great, look what you did.
Look what I did. Look what you did. Get away from me.
Mao Mao and Badgerclops would argue about whose direction for the commercial is correct. With tensions rising, Mao Mao would do something he'd probably regret.
Stop it. Stop it. Right? Meow!
The teaser ends with Adorabat telling Mao Mao that she loves him, with the last shot being his signature green eyes glowing in the dark. This was merely a teaser for a longer animated short called I Love You Mao Mao Bao Bao's Revenge. It doesn't appear to have a clean official release anywhere, but Parker himself on his channel has roughly given the idea of what it would have been for channel members only. Plus a lot of it was packaged into the actual episode Bao Bao's Revenge. However, with this came developing the idea with the intent to pitch it to a better home. Parker wanted to make a statement. He'd recall having a rough time at Nickelodeon when they were looking for new ideas for shows. Pitching Rickman, he'd state that he gave a lot of bad answers for what they were looking for, and how an executive looked at him and repeated the phrase,
You're funny. You're funny.
He felt in his gut he was the unfunniest person in that room, but it was on that day that he learned a lot. With Shamrock Shake, he'd not just get a recommendation to pitch a show to Nickelodeon, but also to work on Bravest Warriors. From Parker's recollection from his members-only livestream, he'd recalled that they wanted him to just do Shamrock Shake.
Shamrock Shake!
But Shamrock Shake was just his idea. The whole point of the short was to show off that he can do a lot of funny voices, even with what he refers to as a stupid idea. Parker has been very vocal about where the inspiration for Mao Mao comes from.
Simmons is the first to tell you that he and his team are huge fans of the Super Nintendo games from the late 1990s. They were very bright and colorful and had this sense of scale that we really enjoyed, says the show creator. We were inspired by the work of Akira Toriyama, which has a lot of goofball action comedy. His role-playing video game Chrono Trigger has robots and swordsmen and cavemen and flying vehicles. Dragon Ball and Dr. Slump totally informed our childhoods.
Akira Toriyama, forever my hero. Rest in peace. Everything that man has touched is gold, and forever will be. Dragon Ball is a huge influence on me. Dragon Quest is a huge influence on me. Chrono Trigger is probably my favorite game of all time.
When I got a little older and the N64 came out, that was the system that was given directly to me. Like, you are the keeper of... Super Nintendo was for everyone. It was really more for my older brother, but the N64 was like, all right, this is for you. As the story goes, I put a race car inside the cartridge slot, and I guess I thought that would make it play a racing game. It didn't. It destroyed it. Thankfully, that was because at that point in 91, when I was like maybe 5 years old, we got a Super Nintendo, and I still remember my older brother blasting through Mario World in a single day. He had the fire power up as Mario, which I thought was very odd since most people have the cape, but I remember that very specifically. That was our first sort of like memory with the Super Nintendo, and that is where things took off for me. But looking back, I'm like, no, I preferred the Super Nintendo.
You can obviously tell that I'm a huge fan of Batman's, admits Simmons. Look at Mao Mao, a gritty, bat-shaped hero with a very low voice, but that's where the similarity ends. We all love Batman the Animated Series, there's no question about it. At a certain level, there was a core aspect of heart to that show, as well as some questions about the lead character's identity, and we explore that in our series too. With Mao Mao, I figured what if our character was like Batman? But he actually listened to what Robin had to say every once in a while.
Like Batman the Animated Series. Is the right room for that, right? Comic-Con?
He wanted to do something that was not like Turbo, but more like Motor City. Something that everyone could feel this sense of agency and ownership with. Something that wasn't like the unnamed pilot. Something that people would have fun with.
More important than that, I knew the type of thing that my friends who were suffering wanted to animate on, and I'm like, that's the show I'm gonna make. I'm gonna make the show that my friends want to work
Oh,
on.
that is
That's
really
the goal.
cool.
And I'll make sure that I dial into whatever it is whoever we're selling this to wants. That's great. But it's gonna be not just the type of thing that I want to do, which it is. It's incredibly personal to me. But it's also beyond that. Cute characters, badass characters, swords, but also guns if we want them, and also motorcycles.
Yeah.
But they can fly. Maybe there's a dinosaur. I don't care. It's whatever we want. That's what's in it. And it's funny, but it's also kind of dark and messed up and sad and weird and disgusting. And it's everything that, again, we wanted to work on, and I think that shows.
He wanted something that represented him and what he wanted to see on TV. He'd protect that kind of perspective, equating it to a fountain of inspiration that he doesn't want to mess with by watching a lot of other media.
Most of the stuff I watch in my spare time is just trash reality TV show. I'm not really trying to take in good artwork. Like, I'm good because
Whatever works.
Whatever fountain I've built of inspiration, I feel like I'm just desperately trying to keep intact, because every artist is kind of a snapshot of their time and their influences. And that isn't to say that I hesitate to grow or change. I just mean, like, I like where I'm at. I like where my stuff is coming from. And it's at a nice, delicate balance. So I'm incredibly competitive. So I get to watch someone else's show and they're like, here's all my millions of dollars that I got to use to do this. I'm like, I'll kill you. I hate you and I want you dead.
Yeah.
That's not good for me to feel that way. So congrats on your show. I'm not watching it. Good job.
Yeah.
I will never see it. Don't take it personally. Let's get lunch. Would love to know you. Not watching your cartoon. Won't happen.
However, nothing can paint the picture better than Parker's AWN interview.
My biggest inspirations were my personal experiences with family and friends, as well as video games and shows I loved as a child. But what allowed Mao Mao to become a fully realized character happened subconsciously. It wasn't until years into development that I realized he was 90% me. Once I leaned into that, everything fell into place.
Mao Mao is a story about identity, particularly Parker's identity. Parker would take more jobs at Titmouse, building himself up and grasping any opportunity that he can get. His strategy was simple: take the leftover resources from other jobs and utilize that towards his dream.
And over the course of a year, I would, they'd give me a chunk of change. I'd be on a project and I would do it maybe a little faster than I should have, and it would get done. And I'm like, okay, we have how many weeks left? We have that budget? That goes to Mao Mao. Give me that. There'd be a little slice here or there, and it added up until, and I called in every favor I had, and I worked every weekend I had, and we made this 6.5 minute short, and I just could not stop. I had to do it. It was more important than making the show. I was like, I want to make something of my own, and even if it doesn't sell, it will exist, and I will have said, this is me, and this is the type of stuff I like to make, and if I were to make a show, it'd be like this. We made it, we screened it went over well, we pitched it, Cartoon Network bought it.
With several years of hard work, putting everything that he represents into the show, Cartoon Network was ready to move forward with it. But they weren't in the best spot at that moment. Cartoon Network would release a wave of content in 2018, calling it a new wave of creators telling stories that are relevant and reflective of today's kids. They would roll out new series for the 2018-2019 lineup, including Apple and Onion, Craig of the Creek, Infinity Train, Summer Camp Island, and Victor and Valentino. Up to this point, Mao Mao wouldn't be formally announced until about a few months, but Parker was working on it every day. Sketch by sketch, iteration over iteration, coming up with concepts, designs, and plans. According to executive producer and Titmouse COO Ben Kalina, it took about 40 weeks for a unit to produce an episode, with 4 to 5 months devoted to pre-production and 2 to post. At the peak, Titmouse had around 55 people working on Mao Mao, supported by the animation team at Malaysia's Inspidia. Animated with Adobe Animate and After Effects, what made this work so well for Parker is that he had a lot of control over retakes or simply revisions of any animated scene. He'd recall even doing more than 50 animation retakes on a single episode, working countless hours on his dream. As far as the writing and dialogue, he'd speak about how it always came natural to him and his crew. It's really not just about coming up with silly voices with them, says Simmons. There have been so many countless times when we were in the booth and we asked the actors, so what would you say in this situation? And they do come up with lines that are simply fantastic, and we keep them. Not every idea was a hit though. In an exclusive Blue Sky post that came out about a month ago, he'd speak about how when workshopping premises, there was one about a cheese dad that didn't pan out too well, since, as a boss, I usually had all the answers. This is the one time I didn't really boost the writer's morale. For the longest time, whenever I was a bit too confident in a pitch or with a note, the writers could always say, cheese dad. Cartoon Network would push their CN app by offering a sneak peek of Mao Mao in June 2019, building to a strong debut the month after. Meanwhile, as the show is finally coming to fruition, Parker would give a short statement about what to expect from the show.
You can expect to get real excited, you can expect to laugh, you can expect to get real sad. My favorite thing in the world to do is make you laugh and then make you feel real bad for it. So you're like, that's real funny, and then, oh no, it's because Dad didn't love him? Oh, I shouldn't be laughing at this. It's like, yeah, think about it. As the season continues, you get more and more lore and backstory and excitement, and your questions, your burning questions will be answered.
And with that, Cartoon Network would release 8 episodes to the Cartoon Network app, website, and video-on-demand service on June 28th, with its proper television debut happening July 1st, 2019, with new episodes premiering Mondays throughout the summer. This is Mao Mao, Heroes of Pure Heart. Within the first episode, titled I Love You Mao Mao, we establish a lot of important lore. We first see one of the 3 main characters, Adorabat, who lives within Pure Heart Valley and is protected by the Ruby Pure Heart, a magical shield that keeps all dangerous entities out and the citizens of Pure Heart Valley, also called Sweetie Pies, safe. Most Sweetie Pies enjoy the safe and low-risk environment that Pure Heart Valley offers, but Adorabat is different. She craves adventures.
Oh, that one looks like a baby bunny!
That one looks like, a monster! A fearsome reptilian beast with 1,000 teeth! Where? This is just too much stimulation. Oh, phooey.
Unfortunately, this doesn't make her a lot of friends within Pure Heart Valley. Meanwhile, the other 2 characters of the main trio, Mao Mao and Badgerclops, formerly Bearclops, are infiltrating the ship of their main nemesis, Orangusnake, and his crew, the Sky Pirates. Mao Mao is fueled with the goal of becoming as great of a hero as his family, and this is something that will be explored throughout this season. He's very principled about how a hero should be, whereas Badgerclops is along for the ride. You'll notice that while the crew looks plentiful and intimidating, after a big explosion, about half of the crew is taken out, with the leftovers being not that impressive. A big fight ensues, with a big getaway at the end, however not without a big cost that'll change everyone's lives forever. Yes, Mao Mao would break the Ruby Pure Heart, which now makes Pure Heart Valley vulnerable to attacks, including one that is teased to happen shortly. King Snugglemane, the ruler of the kingdom, is very open about how he isn't able to protect the village now that the Pure Heart is cracked. Caught between a dilemma of leaving these Sweetie Pies to fend for themselves because of a problem he caused, or staying and protecting Pure Heart Valley from said problems he caused, he decides to take on the duty of being the new sheriff in town, as in his paraphrased words, he'd be no better than the villains he fights if he leaves a mess that he caused, which harms so many people. Although he would take care of the monster quite easily, there'd be several more out in the distance. You know who's hearing about all of this heroism and morals and battle cries? Adorabat, who wants nothing more than to be a part of all of this.
And what do you want?
I want to be that!
Adventurer, swordsman, an action hero.
A hero! Yeah! I want to be a hero!
Despite strict orders to stay with the other Sweetie Pies, she'd have different plans. Meanwhile, the Sky Pirates, now seeing the Ruby Pure Heart, would go on to attempt to steal it. Orangusnake would speak about how it's a legendary landmark and anyone who steals it would be just as legendary as the person who would devote their life to defend it, which gives Mao Mao the fuel he needs to commit to protecting this place.
Hot dog!
Mama, we love you. You're so legendary. How
wish I was as cool as you. Oh, Mama.
I'm not sure what's happening here, but it seems sad.
It was also Adorabat's quick thinking that would save Mao Mao and Badgerclops as they battle to protect it, showcasing that she's not like the other Sweetie Pies and isn't afraid to get her wings dirty. In fact, she parroted a lot of the heroism sayings that Mao Mao was saying earlier when speaking about wanting to become a legendary hero as well. You'll often notice in many of these episodes that once the Sky Pirates are defeated, their ship lands sideways and they'd often shout, which is probably a nod to how in many shows they often have to have said defeated characters show that they're still alive, which is probably more to cover the network's butt from offended parents than anything else. Speaking of the network, according to a now deleted tweet from Parker, the episode was practically completed, but there was a last-minute note about the protagonist needing to wear helmets if they're going to be on what the show calls an aerocycle, which ironically would go on to be powered by a gem cell that the Sky Pirates used in their ship. This is why in future episodes you'll see they use a retractable helmet as their workaround.
You remind me of me, and I'm incredible. I'd be a fool not to recruit myself.
Oh, yeah!
And with that, the first episode would go on to be a great success with a great reception all around. To truly get what makes the rest of this season outstanding, we'll be going through each of the 3 main characters, saving Mao Mao for last, and along the way, going over the Sky Pirates, the lore of Pure Heart Valley, and the last episode to date of the show. Originally a gender-ambiguous character, Adorabat is a sweetie pie within Pure Heart Valley. Parker would speak about his experience with finding the right voice actor for Adorabat, Lika Leong.
I needed someone to do a cute voice. My friend Lika was just around, and I'm like, Lika, can you do a cute voice? And she gave me the biggest, wildest hug out of nowhere and was like, oh my god, yes! And I'm like, it's not that serious. Let's just do this voice, but it's a testament to like how fun it already was just to be doing this little thing.
A fiery, bubbly bat, she appears in each episode of the series. Throughout the show, her loyalty to Mao Mao as well as her bravery is tested. One of the major episodes to do so is the episode Try Hard, an episode where Mao Mao and Badgerclops get trapped in their own plan, leaving Adorabat to save the day. You'll often notice throughout this episode she's very afraid of the Sky Pirates, even though historically throughout the show, the Sky Pirates are not that intimidating or effective. Regardless, she's often tested on being courageous in the face of fear.
Maybe I am feeling myself. Wait, stop it. That tickles. Wait, oh. Wait, let me check. What are you doing?
Although there were tons of setbacks due to her size and being outnumbered, she does save the day in this episode. This is similar to the episode Enemy Mime, where after Mao Mao and Badgerclops fail to neutralize this mimicking jello-like monster, this leaves Adorabat as the only being within Pure Heart Valley who can save them. Within this episode, she'd lean heavily on her magic skills, something that doesn't really come up in any other episode, which is odd but okay, but with said magic skills, she would defeat the monster that no one else could have.
Fact, it's never been seen at all!
Whoa!
As you can tell, she's brave and clever, and while she isn't the first line of defense, she more than holds her own in a trio's dynamic. But with that said, there are some drawbacks to her character, such as her jealousy and insecurities. Within the episode Breakup, the entire premise of the episode is Adorabat being jealous of Mao Mao and Badgerclops' dynamic so much that she indirectly plants the seeds of their demise. When they speak about how they met, we would get Badgerclops' origin story told in 2 different ways, to which we'll speak about that in his section, but what's important here is that they fight over Adorabat's attention.
Mao and Badgerclops are driving me crazy! Can't take it anymore!
At first, she's excited to share the attention with Mao Mao and Badgerclops. However, both of them hog her attention as a way to get back at each other, which drives Adorabat crazy. Within the episode No Shortcuts, she feels insecure about her own ability and uses external gadgets purely for the sake of trying to rush being a legendary hero. In this episode, not only does that not work, but it leads into Adorabat indirectly handing herself over to the Sky Pirates, and one of Ratarang's funniest jokes within the series.
What are we gonna do, boss? What are we gonna do? What are we gonna do? Oh, I dropped my mama's meatballs. Oh, mama!
Just like, Why did he bring the meatballs outside? There's also the perfect adventure, where she gets fearful of the idea of not becoming a hero just at the notion that Mao Mao may have a chill day for once, that she makes up a complete lie just to throw him on a wild goose chase. A big flaw in her character that they explore is that she is insecure, and part of that comes from how she does look up to Mao Mao and Badgerclops, who have more experience underneath their belt. But a lot of this is okay, because she is a child and has a long way to go to learn. The whole premise of Outfox revolves around Adorabat being naive. She'd believe in a scam called Takesgiving, operated by this duo here named Rufus and Reggie. All because they act nice to her, so she assumes nice intentions. She believed in these two so much that even when Mao Mao went out of his way to prove that they were scamming the sweetie pies of Pure Heart, she'd snap at him, which is a rare thing for her to do.
What is wrong with you?
Whoa, Adorabat, I'm just trying to keep you safe.
Settlement of dice. I wish you weren't a big jerk.
It took a master plan from Mao Mao and Badgerclops to expose these two for what they really are to Adorabat, and she wasted no time letting them know how she feels about that. And what I mean is throwing a whole TV. She really craves violence, and you'll see this in several episodes that I can just start naming off the bat. You have Bao Bao's Revenge, where she would be excited to face whom she thought was a vicious threat. You have Bobo-chan, where Adorabat wants nothing more than to destroy Badgerclops' new pet. However, I'd like to go to Trading Day as the primary example of how vicious Adorabat can get. The whole episode is about trading places with each other, with Badgerclops taking the spot of Adorabat and going to school. While there, he does act rude, but ultimately gets made fun of by the other sweetie pies, which hurts his feelings. Around the end of the episode, he'd tell Adorabat this, and I've never heard such raw anger come from such a small character.
Were you name-calling my friend at school today?
A little.
How would you like it if we called you names?
No, I don't think I would like that very much at all.
I told you to behave while I was gone! Listen up! This is my classroom!
I'd sure hate to switch lives with them right now.
Her ruthlessness and adventure-craving reputation has ostracized her with the other sweetie pies her age. Within Lonely Kid, she seeks out guidance from Mao Mao about his childhood to see how he made friends at her age, given that she's having trouble making them. There's also the episode Zing Your Heart Out, where it was shown that she was made fun of by another sweetie pie. Within this episode, it would clearly show that the Ruby Pure Heart has unknown powers that influence how Adorabat spoke to people.
Excuse me? I'm selling flowers for my school trip, so if you could please buy flowers so I can afford to go to the hospital.
Get out of your face, looks like a mess of pancake.
Wait, to me?
We don't get a full explanation about how the crack in the Ruby Pure Heart would affect the town in this episode, unfortunately, but you may wonder why a child has just been allowed to fight crime and face danger on a daily basis with no one stepping in. Well, we would learn in a major episode called Adorabat that the reason she's been able to get away with this is because her father simply never thought to check in on her ever since she's enlisted herself as a hero in training.
It's just I've been, working so much, double, triple shifts. I thought she was at her banjo lesson.
For 8 months?
Well, yes, at first, but then I started to wonder if...
For the first time, Adorabat isn't allowed to go crime fighting. Mao Mao and Badgerclops are surprisingly very mature about the situation, not forcing her father to comply with her wishes and respecting his authority, even if there is evidence to suggest that she does fine on her own. This doesn't mean that they take it lightly, much the opposite. Adorabat would fight the notion of just staying safe indoors, much like the other sweetie pies in Pure Heart, and we'd get to the core of why she loves adventuring so much.
Do you have any idea what kind of creatures come out at night? I can't protect you out there!
I used to go exploring in those caves with Mom all the time. She wasn't afraid of anything.
And then one day, Sonara, she didn't come back with you.
This would be the only mention of Adorabat's mother within the show, and it shows why she clicked with Mao Mao and Badgerclops so easily. I enjoyed that the show didn't inherently demonize the notion that her father simply doesn't want to lose her daughter, especially in the same way that he lost his wife. It would take seeing Adorabat in action for her dad to change his ways and approve of Adorabat pursuing her passions.
I thought I needed to protect you, but it's been so hard, and
It's okay, Daddy. I miss her too.
You can't just leave without the most fearless member of the group.
I'm back!
She represents the heart of the team with her bright-eyed, half-innocent, half-very dark view of the world around her. Badgerclops, on the other hand, would be the body of the team. He'd probably take great offense to that and think I'm calling him fat, which I'm not. He's just the glue between Mao Mao's incessant pursuit of greatness and Adorabat's unfiltered drive of adventure. More often than not, he's needed to keep things grounded, but even he has moments of insanity. Originally called Bearclops and sporting more of a muzzle, he'd be the foil for Mao Mao. Griff is one of my best friends and one of my longtime collaborators on a million projects. Badgerclops, which used to be called Bearclops, had to be a good foil for Mao Mao, and Griff is mine, explained Simmons. Griff and I just naturally get into these arguments, which actually end up on the show. Before meeting Mao Mao and Adorabat, he'd shown to have a poor relationship with magic with an enemy mime.
My stepbrother Gerald was a magician, okay? Do you know how many coins he pulled from my ear before I realized he was just stealing my ice cream money? I never forgave him!
However, at the end of the episode, he'd appreciate what Adorabat showcases with magic and reconsider his relationship with his stepbrother, Gerald. It should be noted that he has an eye patch, but he doesn't have his cyborg arm, which suggests that he lost his arm sometime after his childhood. He used to hide his creativity, repressing it so much that it would show up against his own free will. He dubbed this Ultra Focus, a state of mind Badgerclops gets in, once again, against his own free will, where he would invent several different items with no memory of doing so, or even why he did it in the first place. His parents had different plans for him, apparently something to do with blueprints, maybe suggesting engineering. He kept this a tight-lipped secret, even after meeting Mao Mao and later Adorabat. However, it would return to haunt him, and he'd be forced to speak about it.
I always loved inventing weird, fun, wacky stuff, but my parents, they didn't like it at all. Also, there was a bunch of other kids at school and some other people throughout my life who mocked me relentlessly, so I would hide my creativity away. Hide it so deep inside that they just came out as these super creative states. I call it Ultra Focus because, like I said, I'm just super creative.
The other aspect of his backstory that mostly happens before the events of the show is that he used to be the muscle in a gang called the Thicket Thieves, which was shown within the episode Breakup. He'd have more of a British accent, which might be a callback to how Parker voiced Badgerclops with a British accent, but he didn't enjoy the execution. Despite different recollections on exactly how Mao Mao and Badgerclops met, what is known is that Badgerclops fought on the side of good from that day forward. For the most part. In nearly every episode, he'd be shown to eat food, to the point where it's become such a fun visual gag. Here's every episode in which he ate food in a short montage. Not just a foodie, but also a pack rat who'd much rather play video games or watch TV than do his job. He could be lazy at times. Within the perfect adventure, he bailed on the adventure because of stairs.
Thanks for carrying me, Badgerclops. Looks like there's gonna be a lot of walking.
That's it, I'm out.
What's wrong?
We've been doing things your way all day, man. I'm done. You keep saying adventure when what you really mean is walking up and down stairs all day.
Within Captured Clops, he'd become so tired with his chores that he joined the enemy team specifically because they didn't make him stick to his responsibilities. Within The Truth Stinks, a major Badgerclops episode, the entire premise is that Badgerclops would rather believe in crystals than take a shower, with most of the kingdom doing their best to spare his feelings and not tell him how bad he smells. Badgerclops would have a reputation of not taking criticism well, often having quite frankly immature outbursts around it, and in this episode, it makes it awkward because the kingdom is right.
I'm just gonna be honest with myself. I hate showering.
Don't forget to get under his arm plate.
Overall, he shines as the foil to Mao Mao. Some of my favorite episodes of choice would be No Shortcuts, which would show Mao Mao being the reasonable one, and Badgerclops enabling Adorabat's unfiltered drive to be as legendary as Mao Mao. Given that he's really good with electronics, he'd supply Adorabat with robotics of her own, which doesn't go great for her, and is very foolish of him to support. However, in the same vein, you can have an episode such as Mao Mao's bike adventure, where it's painfully obvious that leaving his bike in the open after flaunting how much of an advantage he'd have against the Sky Pirates is simply going to entice them to steal his Aerocycle. And Badgerclops calls it.
As you know, the official company Aerocycle was stolen.
By the Sky Pirates.
I already told you that's impossible, and a hero is never wrong!
Their differences in opinions would be heavily tested in episodes such as Head Chef. The episode is all about how Mao Mao goes with the flow with cooking, seeing it more as an art, and Badgerclops sees it more as a science, using his robotic self to calculate the perfect way to cook something. This would lead into a cooking competition, which, spoiler alert, neither of them win, that shows how trivial their disagreements could start and blossom into full-on episodes. He'd have a little bit of a nurturing side come out within Bobo-chan, where after his friends are very much in danger around Bobo-chan, a wild animal that Badgerclops claims as his own, he'd go into the forest with him and take care of him until he believes that he died. And it isn't until the end of that episode in which all of the parenting he does comes back to help him.
See that right there? Yeah, that's how it's done.
This is only scratching the surface of their banter and arguments, with so many more episodes arguing about couches, mugs, swords, being sick, being aggressive, and so much more. I mean, there's also the episode Ultraclops, where after feeling unheard, he'd grow very large due to the magic from Camille and her apprentice Honey, who show up quite a few times in the show. They're actually really cool characters. And fun fact, Pure Heart Valley also has a news station, which reports on this development.
Your idea is to become big and fight me and destroy more of the kingdom? Yeah, great idea, genius.
Well, I don't hear your great idea, Clark!
If there's one character who agrees with Badgerclops' love of getting underneath Mao Mao's skin, it's Mao Mao's former partner, Tanya Keys. She appears in the episode aptly titled Meet Tanya Keys, where she'd come to collect a bounty on Badgerclops given his previous connection to the Thicket Thieves. Despite being on the opposite ends of the conflict, they'd share a moment speaking about the Black Cat.
Can you just run off and get the bounty now?
I just like messing with the guy, you know?
Yeah, totally, thank you!
He's all like, Justice!
That's exactly what he would say!
We'll get to how Mao Mao would feel about Tanya Keys and how they would solve it in his section, but I hope I've shown how Badgerclops is pretty much Mao Mao's best friend, that he protects and guides, annoys and torments, and everything in between. He's very sassy, he's very sensitive, and even Parker would say the essence of his character is, this wouldn't have happened if they weren't so mean to me.
How could anyone think these inventions are useful in this life?
I said to stop criticizing me!
Badgerclops.
In a now deleted tweet by Parker, he'd also add, it's kind of an unwritten rule that Badgerclops never learns lessons, or if he does, it's the wrong lesson. You can say whatever you like, but I say it's because he has too much depth to learn a shallow cartoon moral. He's too smart to see simple ideas. We saved the sheriff for last, and we have a lot to speak about that will separate between work and family. Before we dive into how he is on screen, his journey off screen is just as important. While Mao Mao's character is largely a reflection of the creator, there's also another quite obvious inspiration in hindsight.
Really, it's inspired by a cat of mine who's dead now, named Zorro. The character was inspired by him, and he would always do these massive yawns, and I'd be like, look at those teeth!
Yeah.
Because he'd be adorable one second, and then mouthful of razor-sharp fangs the next, and I just thought that was a funny juxtaposition. And so, especially for a hero character, I'm like, the idea of a hero, a traditional hero with a mouthful of razor-sharp fangs is funny to me.
Voiced by the creator of the show, Parker Simmons, this wasn't always going to be the case.
It was Greg Sipes plays. They wanted Beast Boy to be Mao Mao, and I was like, that was like one of the last things they said to me after we were sort of sealing the deal. They're like, I'm gonna tell you a couple things they brought up. Mao Mao needs to be significantly younger. Let's make him maybe more of a kid or a teen. They were saying we should cast Beast Boy, and this was like last minute. In my mind, we'd already sold the show.
Oh, I get why they would want to push Greg Sipes because he's a very talented voice actor, but knowing what Parker brought to the character, I cannot hear anyone else voice Mao Mao. When workshopping the idea of the show, he didn't immediately know it, but when drawing this character for the first time, the show would really revolve around him. In fact, speaking of him, Parker was very firm on the idea of running this show solo.
If you don't have the experience to executive produce and run your own show, they're going to make you a co-EP or something like that, and then give you a showrunner, which is another viable path. That was maybe an option at first, and I was like, no. Executive producer. Slide that back across the table, fix that, sweetheart, thank you very much, signed, now I'll run it.
This show is very personal to him, and we'll get to why soon. His identity revolves around pushing to be a better hero, and what I like to refer to as his hero's journey. If you remember in the first episode, he spoke about what a hero should and shouldn't do.
So you're just gonna stay here and be miserable out of guilt or something?
Yes, because a hero does what's right, even if it crushes them inside.
He'd get officially declared sheriff of Pureheart Valley by their king, King Snugglemade, that Mao Mao has a pretty interesting relationship with, that we'll get to soon. Mao Mao's morals would only get more and more detailed as he ventures through his own hero's journey. Basically, Mao Mao would have a lot of absolutes and hard-coded objective statements such as a hero never does X or all heroes Y. And there's many episodes to show how he's wrong about these. There's Mao Mao's Bike Adventure, where he would speak about how a hero's gut is never wrong, and therefore not consider the obvious hints that the Sky Pirates are going to steal their vehicle, which I spoke about in the Badgerclops section. Later in that episode, when he sees for himself that his gut was wrong, Badgerclops was right, and the Sky Pirates did steal his Aerocycle specifically to get the gem in it to power up their ship to steal the Ruby Pureheart, he's crushed on the inside.
I was wrong! I was wrong about everything. I'm no hero.
So what, you're just gonna give up?
You see, my hero's instincts were wrong all day. Any plan I come up with to stop them now will be the same. Wrong. Maybe a hero can be wrong as long as he never gives up and does what's right.
There's also Sick Mao, where he would say that heroes are never sick because sick means weak and heroes aren't weak. The entire episode is about him pretty much working while sick, which everyone else can see.
This is kind of funny at first, but now it's just kind of gross, and I'm not really into gross out humor.
We are doctors now. Prepare for surgery.
Just admit that you're sick. Come on, Mao Mao.
Apparently, we'd see in Sugarberry Fever that there is a physical book called the Hero's Code, which apparently forbids cobbler. His parents disapproved of cobbler, so he swore himself from it, even though he enjoys it very much. We'll get to this deeper when we get into the family section, but many motivations Mao Mao has come from his parents, particularly his father. Mao Mao would often have to be careful with the example he sets, like within the episode Thumb War, because he was refusing to compete in competitions where he had a clear disadvantage. This taught Adorabat to not try with anything.
Hey Adorabat, how about a round of doorbell danglers? It'll warm you up before your next match.
Nah, it's okay.
But you love doorbell danglers.
Doesn't really matter.
Is Adorabat giving up because she's been watching me do that this whole time? Ugh, I'm so pathetic. I fought enough battles to know when it's not worth it, but Adorabat hasn't. I should have been cheering her on instead of talking her down.
It isn't often acknowledged in the show, but Mao Mao does his best to not steer Adorabat astray. There's also Scared of Puppets, where he would portray a macho image of not being afraid of anything, only to be afraid of puppets. Long story short, not only is he afraid of puppets, but his father was a key reason as to why he feels this need to hide this fear from everyone.
What are you doing under the table, boy? Scared?
Dad, what are you doing here? Why am I wearing underwear? I don't wear underwear!
Despite his shaky foundation of right and wrong, it is these lessons that teach him to be a better hero and learn that life is gray, which often leads into him doing the right thing. But not always. In the episode Legend of the Torbaclon, all of the Sweetie Pies come together to celebrate a being they claim to see called the Torbaclon. The entire episode is somewhat of an analogy towards the struggle of two different sides. So the first side is the people who believe in a thing that they can't or don't want to prove, and the other side is just people who pursue truth, even at the expense of people liking them. You can replace Torbaclon with several entities that people struggle to believe in: aliens, ghosts, Santa, a fan of Long John Silver's, and the episode would remain largely unchanged. Mao Mao is clearly on the side of truth because he believes that heroes should search for truth above all else.
Wait, I don't get it. Why is everyone going home?
I don't know. I guess it's just not fun anymore.
We were just having fun.
Fun? Upholding truth and justice may be the pillars of heroism, but no true hero would ruin a party.
What I enjoy a lot from this episode is that it leans into the fact that the Sweetie Pies aren't hurting anyone by believing this. This isn't like Outfox, where their beliefs were harming them without them knowing. Here, at worst, they're playing pretend. It took Mao Mao ruining the phenomenon for everyone for him to reflect that his job shouldn't make the people whom he swore to protect feel worse about themselves. There'd also be the episode The Perfect Couple, where Mao Mao would at first be jealous of the relationship between the couple Penny and Benny, two Sweetie Pies that you would see together often. The reason is because they're simply referred to as, aptly, the perfect couple, to which Mao Mao reflects on the years it has taken him to just be barely away from perfection and resent that Penny and Benny could achieve this so seemingly easy. This would lead to him spying on the two and revealing to the public what they do for each other behind their backs. While he initially meant these as good things, it revealed dirty secrets the duo have on each other.
No, stop fighting. Stop fighting, you're ruining my perfect day! This can't be. Is perfection even possible? No.
It turns out these secrets would be deal breakers for the formerly thought of as perfect couple. However, later on in the episode, Mao Mao would learn that they're striving for perfection and showing how they had those dirty secrets because they cared about each other's feelings would teach him that, again, his endless pursuit for truth and justice shouldn't come above making the people who he protects feel worse. It is implied that before he met Badgerclops, one of his partners was Man's best friend. As he speaks about him in Bao Bao's Revenge, he'd be very upset that Bao Bao plans to visit Pureheart Valley, given that their last encounter would be so traumatic for Mao Mao that he wouldn't be the same person afterwards, both on the inside or outside.
I held the entrance to the cave open for Bao Bao.
Hurry!
And that's when he betrayed me. He ran off with the amulet and left me holding a boulder.
Wait!
But I couldn't hold it for long.
My tail!
P.S. That means all three main characters are amputees, which is kind of unique. While the episode carries this notion that Mao Mao exaggerates things, and trust me, Mao Mao does indeed exaggerate a lot, him losing his tail is the truth. In fact, to this point, within the episode Lucky Ducky Mug, Mao Mao would state that his mug has been on every single adventure he's been on, which includes Bao Bao leaving him.
This mug has been with me through it all. Every battle, every challenge, every hardship. Yes, sir, he's a fighter, just like me.
This clearly shows us to not trust Mao Mao's memory. When we see Bao Bao outside of flashbacks, you'll see that he wasn't this anthropomorphic dog that Mao Mao may have made it out to be, but rather a plain dog, at least seemingly. When a big monster comes to terrorize Pureheart Valley, the former duo would band together in an oddly wholesome way to take out the monster, only for Bao Bao to run off again, which doesn't make Mao Mao feel good.
You're real bad, and now you're sad, and you want to cry.
I'm fine.
It was just you and
what are you doing?
And you loved each other.
Stop it!
And Bao left you. He didn't really leave you.
No,
He
that's
just loved
stop.
Butterfly.
I'm not.
I'll never leave you, Mao Mao.
The show was fortunately able to give more development on how they met. Apparently at a village that Mao Mao was dumped off to while his family went on actual adventures, Mao Mao would have a lot of trouble making friends. This episode, Lonely Kid, would show that the soon-to-be Sheriff Cat was viewed as the weird kid by peers his age. It wasn't until a younger Bao Bao showed up when things would change.
What'd you fish that out for? It's just garbage. No, I don't want it. Stop it.
Now they would mess everything up for the village, as the whole episode revolves around a misunderstanding of the village's yearly tradition of greeting this mountain-born monster named the Flimborg, but they'd gain a bond of being the only ones who care about each other.
So weird. I mean, I screwed everything up, and I didn't make a single friend. I should be sad, but I'm not. Why is that? You're right. It's because I have you, and you're my friend.
Speaking of care, it's time to speak about the king. King Snugglemane is a very flamboyant type of royalty. He does appreciate the level of dedication Mao Mao has towards protecting Pureheart Valley, but it isn't smooth sailing. For one, within the episode Frightwig, we'd learned that the king finds Mao Mao and his crew very judgmental of the king and his actions.
We still don't understand why you won't tell us what you're afraid of.
Oh, for the love... I'm afraid of your opinion, okay? You're also judgmental and pushy, so I thought, I'll write a tasteful little song to express how I feel it. But no, you didn't get it!
You'd have the episode He's the Sheriff, where the king would get jealous of Mao Mao's connection with the people and step in to be a sheriff for a day. They'd both have very high egos, and they'd clash in this episode, with Mao Mao's respect for the king often being the reason why he lets the king win in their squabbles.
You let me help with the place settings.
Your Highness, there's no time!
I lost my license because of all the crimes I committed. Huh, I wonder what that was. Oh!
Granted, he'd blow up at the king, and this would be one of the rare times the king's people were not behind him, but they would reconcile by the end of this episode. But since we previously talked about Bao Bao, there's also the confusing to pronounce episode Baust in show, where Bao Bao would return to Pureheart Valley and be very friendly with the king, which only makes Mao Mao jealous of the attention.
How about a little wager then, shall we? Whoever wins best in show shall keep both pets. Easy peasy. You're on.
Excellent. Then we shall truly see who's best in show. Bye. Come along, Bao Bao.
Now, the king also enjoys the attention he gets from Bao Bao. He'd run a pet show just to show off their bond. Mao Mao would learn in this episode that Bao Bao comes and goes and isn't particularly tied to anyone, and that includes the king. There'd also be the episode Popularity Conquest, where the king would show that Mao Mao isn't that popular within Pureheart Valley and somewhat nudge him to act more polite, which is not who Mao Mao is.
Hey guys, remember me? I'm the Mao Mao that's living in the now. Pow pow.
His other partner would be a tanuki called Tanya Keys, which I mentioned at the end of the Badgerclops section. She'd carry herself more as a chaotic good, willing to break a couple of rules for the greater good. This would clash with Mao Mao's more lawful good demeanor of abiding by the rules to do good. In that episode, titled Meet Tanya Keys, Mao Mao would frequently be flustered with her appearance. They don't explicitly say that they had an intimate relationship, so what I will say is that if it was anything close to his relationship with Bao Bao, I'm sure they formed a very deep bond for each other.
Aren't y'all friends?
Well, we used to work together. Briefly. Adult relationships are more complicated than that, Adorabat, and it's not my fault if she doesn't know how to follow the rules.
The entire episode is about Mao Mao trying to stay within the rules to rescue Badgerclops, who again is wanted for his previous affiliation with the Thicket Thieves. Like with many of the episodes in this work section, you could probably guess that he'd break his absolute rule of heroes must always follow the rules to save his best friend, which impresses Tanya so much that she would drop bounty hunting for Badgerclops. But if anything could represent his relationship with work, it would be through his main nemesis, Orangusnake, and to a lesser extent, the Sky Pirates. They'd have such a wacky and fun dynamic where it's clear they both just want respect and admiration for what they do. Let's take a little detour to speak about Orangusnake within the episode titled Orangusnake Begins. It may come as a little surprise to some of you, but Orangusnake is actually composed of two different animals rather than being one creature. Originally being Kobe and Tanner, shown here, they struggled to get any respect as individuals.
From that day forward, I was no longer Kobe and Tanner, but one beautiful, terrible being!
It wasn't until they combined forces that Kobe was the mouthpiece and Tanner mostly seems to be the muscle, as he doesn't speak in the show. In this episode, Badgerclops would have to frequently warn Mao Mao that although they don't have too much of a problem defeating the Sky Pirates, it just seems unnecessary to insult them and tease them while doing so. This feeds into Mao Mao's ego in pursuit of becoming a great hero. But Orangusnake, much like King Snugglemane, also has a big ego. And in this episode, it manifests into a giant robot. Interestingly enough, in this fused together form of all of the Sky Pirates, Orangusnake doesn't want to destroy Mao Mao, as once he gets Mao Mao to admit that he fears him, they bask in it, asking him to repeat it several times, showing that Orangusnake just wants the same type of respect and admiration that Mao Mao wants too.
Do you fear me? I fear you!
Wait, really?
Yes, I fear you.
Say it again.
When the Sky Pirates are not trying to steal the Aero Cycle to power their ship, or terrorize the town, or steal the Ruby Pureheart, they're often in their own destroyed ship, living off of a few rations, if not existing within the town's dump. It was actually within the episode Sleeper's Sofa, where they got a taste of Mao Mao's home that they actually kind of wanted to avoid breaking anything in it, implying that they don't have a lot of memories of being properly taken care of. I hope I've explained how Mao Mao's views work, but if not, take it from Parker, who speaks about how Mao Mao initially was pitched.
I believe what I said was He-Man meets the Care Bears. I believe that was the phrase I used. And sometimes I think I said Thundercats meets Care Bears, but then they were making a Thundercats show. Right. If you want a character like Mao Mao, who again comes from all my sort of personal experiences, I'm like, I'm a grown man. I'm not a child learning to be a hero. The allegory of being a hero, as far as, you know, your main character goes, I already am one. So that's the position I'm writing from. So how do you make a hero who's already incredible and amazing learn anything?
Right.
And I think initially I was like, Mao Mao isn't learning, he's unlearning things.
Yeah.
Mao Mao's lived a life where with a lot of weird, toxic patterns that he's internalized that make no sense logically when you really break them down, but it's gotten him this far, weirdly.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, well, how do you, and because that is, you know, when you're an adult, that's most of your adult life is learning, oh, this stuff that got me through is maybe at best a coping mechanism. Right. It's definitely not a strategy for life.
Within All By Mao's self, we would get into one of the earliest peeks into what drives him to be a hero so bad, when we'd see one of the several flashbacks into his childhood.
Desperately trying to catch up.
We'd see one of the rare shots of what his sisters may look like. I say may because Mao Mao has a tendency to exaggerate things. However, as you can see, he doesn't often recall positive moments with his family, and this is a big clue as to what truly drives his hero's journey. There's small hints in the beginning of the show that Mao Mao really holds his father in a high light. There's a small moment at the end of Outfox, of which I spoke about in the Adorabat section, about the two scam artists who conned the sweetie pies out of their stuff because of their nice and charming act. Towards the end of that episode, when Mao Mao and Badgerclops outsmart the duo, Mao Mao lets it slip what's often on his mind.
It was only a matter of time before I got a confession out of you, and then I took off my suit, and then Badgerclops took off his suit, and then we handcuffed you, and you took me to jail, and I became a true hero, and my sisters love me, and my dad finally—
Stop! That hasn't happened yet!
Oh, just got ahead of myself.
This chase for his father's admiration would embarrassingly manifest itself in the episode Not Impressed, an episode I spoke about before, where even though every other sweetie pie is cheering the crew on, Old Blue, this sweetie pie here, is not impressed with Mao Mao's feats of heroism. Mao Mao would struggle to let this go, instead taking it as a challenge that he fails at each time, only freaking out Old Blue even more. You'll notice that he keeps referring to a specific memory that's teased all throughout the episode. This memory is of Mao Mao doing an impressive feat of athleticism, only for his father to blow it off.
Daddy, watch me, Daddy!
Not now, Momo. I'm trying to train your sisters to become legendary warriors. Me, your dad. Come on, girls. 1 and 2 and 1 and 2.
And as this episode beautifully illustrates, Mao Mao is projecting his father's lack of attention towards him through this sweetie pie, who in the grand scheme of this show doesn't really come up that much. In this episode, he'd stoop to essentially tricking Old Blue, using a suit made of chubum, which isn't the only time he'd use a suit of a sweetie pie to trick someone, and in a grand celebration, once he hears that Old Blue is impressed, it'd come out in the most embarrassing way.
Did you all see that, huh? I knew it! I knew it! I knew you loved me, Daddy! Daddy! Daddy!
Unfortunately, we only seem to get one episode that involves his family, but that one episode packs a huge punch. We get a proper introduction to Shin Mao, who is Mao Mao's father, for the first time in small. Apparently, he's only coming to visit because Mao Mao's mother urged him to check in on Mao Mao. You'll notice through his destruction of everything that Mao Mao and his friends own that he doesn't really take them seriously, and often downplays Mao Mao's achievements, constantly comparing them to his sister's achievements, which sound great, but relatively they all sound like great achievements. He'd also speak about Mao Mao's sword in a very poor way.
Hey, isn't that the glow stick I gave you? Can't believe you still held on to this toy.
Papa, please. I've told you many times her name is Geraldine, and she is the blade of everlasting light.
As you can tell, even one of his most prized possessions is viewed as an afterthought. This is explored more in the episode Weapon of Choice, where we would get a full flashback that shows all of Mao Mao's sisters getting fantastic golden weapons, and meanwhile, Mao Mao would get something that appears to just be anything within his father's reach just to make his son go away.
Well, that should be it for all the cool weapons.
But where's mine?
Oh, Momo, I didn't realize you were still here. Let's see. Oh, here.
Mao Mao would struggle with this in this episode, seeing that any powers he gave to it are just imaginary. Now, getting back to the episode Small, there's even small things, such as Shin Mao not getting Mao Mao's name correct all throughout this episode.
Hey, Mimo, aren't you going to introduce me to your little friends? Do you actually live in this dollhouse, Momo?
It's Mao Mao.
At least that's not your fault, Mimo. How's that wood coming along there, son?
Also, since we're on the topic of Mao Mao holding what are seemingly regular things in a high light, there's also the episode Mao Mao's Nakey, where he would hold his clothes in a high light specifically because it was the closest his father has gotten to his actual name.
Those clothes mean everything to me!
Hot dog, hero's clothes.
Looking sharp, Mao Mao.
That was the closest he ever got to my actual name.
Badgerclops and Adorabat would get the vibes that Shin Mao's dismissive behavior may have a significant amount to do with why Mao Mao is the way that he is today almost immediately. Not only this, but when Shin Mao meets Mao Mao's nemesis, a Snake, he sizes him up in a way that gives everyone involved embarrassment. You can tell a lot of pent-up frustration is coming back up just in the presence of his father that he doesn't wish to speak about, but it comes out anyway. When fighting this monster here, Mao Mao finally lets his father know how he feels.
Sometimes, when you're not around, I actually kind of like myself. I think you're more worried that I'll embarrass you!
It's here when we see that Shin Mao is about the same size as Mao Mao and isn't able to do much without his big suit. Mao Mao uses this chance to finally display his skills and training that was mostly fueled off of proving his family wrong that he is a great adventurer. It's a very touching episode that I spoke about in detail here, which is why I'm glossing over several details.
I know you always say there's no shame in being small.
Mao Mao, my son, you are not small.
I hope I've painted the picture as clear as I can. Parker, ever since the show premiered, has been very open with the fact that he shares a lot of similarities with Mao Mao.
Mao Mao comes from a very personal place in my heart. That's the best I can do. I don't want to say Mao Mao is me because that's not true, thankfully. I'm very happy to not be him because he's got a lot of problems, but a lot of the problems he has are also mine. You know, when you're writing stories, you draw from that well, whether or not it's literal and one-to-one. That's part of what makes, you know, any character that feels sincere and interesting feel that way because it comes from a real place.
This is why I had to start from the very beginning. Being born of the youngest of several siblings, having lots of pressure put on you, being in a competitive space, parents being so focused on others, parents being so drained at the point of having you, wanting to be the best version of you and learn what a hero truly is, Mao Mao Heroes of Pure Heart is just as much about Parker as it is about anyone who identifies with that struggle.
Anybody who's watched my show, it's like, yeah, it's one-to-one. The only difference is, you know, I have 5 sisters, Mao Mao has 5 sisters, but I also have 3 brothers and he doesn't. I was like, extraneous. We're going to be exploring the issues that a young man grows up with. We've got the young man character. I don't need 3 more.
Parker would speak about how his sisters often took the role of being a parent for him.
Anytime my siblings will watch the show, I could tell when they're watching because they'll randomly text me out of the blue and go, love you baby bro, or like, I love you brother, and I'm like, you're watching the show and you're like, oh no, he's not well. Uh-oh, I don't think this was good on him. I feel like they're like, just so you know, we like you. You're good enough. And I'm like, it's okay.
Unpacking all that emotional.
Yeah, I have to text them and be like, it's okay. We're good. I know for a fact I called a couple of my sisters mom because I just didn't know any better. And they'll say it. They'll be like, no, you were my baby. And I'm like, don't get weird.
Now, even with this, it should be noted that with the lack of a canon redemption arc for Shin Mao beyond the small gestures he's shown within Small, this has led to some pushback against his character, which Parker defends heavily, asking out of genuine desire to learn, and not to provoke you, what exactly is your objective for the handling of Shin Mao? I've already seen some aggravation from people dissatisfied with how his debut episode wrapped up, and although I've never been in a similar situation myself, I'm a little concerned about where Shin and Mao Mao's arc will take them, given how badly Shin's affected Mao Mao already. I'm very much looking forward to seeing more of your work regardless, so best of luck to you. All I gotta say is watch the show, and don't get ahead of yourselves. There's a lot of meat on this bone, and we're not going to solve an entire lifelong relationship in 11 minutes. That'd be nuts. Given that this post was September of 2019, unfortunately, we're not getting to the meat of this dynamic. However, to conclude the topic of family on a more positive note, Parker also does defend his real-life father's role in such a big family publicly.
My father was not Clancy Brown, and he didn't purposefully ignore me. There's a nuance in that in the show that I think a lot of people are like, oh, I hate Mao Mao's dad, and I'm like, you try having that many kids and being able to pay attention to all of them equally. You're going to fail. Beyond that, they're justified in their thinking, and it's like, it's also interesting to see how other people can have an opinion on something that, while it's art, is also very much like, hey, this is my truth. Go away. You don't get to have an opinion on my life. I am sharing it with you. You are allowed to laugh at it and cry at it, but you're not allowed to say, I hate X, Y, and Z. Like, no. You weren't there. Get out.
It is unfortunate that we don't get to see Mao Mao and Shin Mao's relationship get on better terms, but what's more important is that Parker doesn't seem to carry any harsh feelings towards his father. His work on Mao Mao would continue to be felt through all ages and throughout the industry. Going into 2020, the first 30 episodes would be added to what used to be called HBO Max, with the last 10 episodes being added the year after. Unfortunately, we don't have any numbers to show how well it did, but we know that Mao Mao would win a Daytime Emmy that even Parker was shocked that he won. Within 2020, Parker would be nominated as a, quote, outstanding performer in an animated program, unquote, against tough competition, and not win. He'd be nominated the year after and speak about it here.
I'm the worst person in the world because someone's like, oh, you got an Emmy nomination. I'm like, yeah, for the second year in a row. No big deal, but that's an important distinction. When it happened last year, I was like, this is a mistake. Not that I don't believe in myself, but there are so many people who submit. And I remember I talked to a friend of mine who's like, yeah, I don't know how that happened. And I was like, well, hey, believe in me a little bit. She's like, I'm sorry, but it's rough in there. I don't know how in the world you got through because there are so many amazing people. She's like, you got really lucky. This is awesome. She's like, you should be proud, but you got lucky. And it happened again! All of which is to say, I still kind of can't believe it. I'm happy with the work that I do. I believe in the work that I do. I have to believe that I'm a good actor and a good voice actor, or I wouldn't pursue it. Right. But that only gets you so far. And when I look at, like, last year, stiff competition. This year, it's all gods. I don't have a chance.
Little did he know, he would actually win.
I mean, you won an Emmy for Mao Mao.
I was shocked to be nominated the first time, and I was blown away to be nominated the second time. And I honestly thought I was reading an article from a year ago when that happened. And so it's easy for me to sit here and say, like, I have no idea how it happened, but in my heart, I tried my best. So don't I belong there if I gave it my all?
And he deserves it. There's so much about Mao Mao as a character that I enjoy, even beyond the voice acting, particularly that Mao Mao doesn't fit in an archetype of characters of shows around him. He was not a save-the-world do-gooder who's morally driven to be as nice and polite to everyone around him that many shows are pretty much copy and pasting. And there's nothing wrong with that archetype, but it's easier to spot when shows go against that common, easy-to-work-with structure and try something unique or different, which really stuck with me. Between that and the great character development, we get around to the last episode in this season, Strange Bedfellows, which I spoke about here. But to summarize, their rivalry would pretty much end not resolved.
You saved me, but I'm the bad guy. Ugh, what kind of hero are you?
I'm the kind of hero who wants to save you so I can fight you later. At the right time and place.
No. Just somebody wheel me away from him.
No disrespect to Strange Bedfellows, but it didn't seem like a grand finale for such a great season. It seemed like a regular episode, and that's most likely because it was. We'd get a second season to be confirmed in production at Comic-Con at Home on July 23rd, 2020. In a now removed article from CBR, it reads,
In Season 2, Mao Mao and team will face new villains, new monsters, and new adventures in their quest to protect Pure Heart Valley. Along the way, they will make new friends, and we'll even meet some of Mao Mao's family as we learn more about what fuels Mao Mao's drive to become a legendary hero.
They would showcase an animatic, and there would be several bits and pieces teased or shared from the crew about Season 2, but after that, radio silence. I would love to speak about this more in detail, but COVID seems to have hit Cartoon Network and its parent companies quite hard. Ever since, it felt like the company has been scrambling to keep their unsustainable promise of growing profits. As many people would know, within 2022, Warner Bros. And Discovery would merge together, thus also merging HBO Max and Discovery Plus to become simply Max. The consequence of this was the removal of several different animated shows from their streaming service.
As we work toward our content catalogs together under one platform, we will be making changes to the content offering available on both HBO Max and Discovery Plus. That will include the removal of some content from both platforms, the company said. At the same time, we're already starting to bring our content catalog together, like the launch of the new CNN Originals Hub on Discovery Plus and a curated collection of Magnolia Network content coming soon to HBO Max.
One of the shows removed was Mao Mao, Heroes of Pure Heart. Not only this, but later on, Cartoon Network would remove all references of the show from their websites, channels, and social media platforms.
Not only have these shows have been removed, but the turnaround from the announcement to the actual removal was so quick that many fans barely had time to react. It's all part of Warner Bros. Discovery's latest move to turn a profit, following laying off 14% of the HBO Max staff and canceling the upcoming Batgirl movie. Yet for the creators behind the shows and for the fans who love them, it feels particularly cruel.
It's quite ironic that a show about a character just wanting recognition for all of the cool stuff that they were doing would have such a lukewarm ending towards it all that sends a message of how little they viewed the show. To be cut so early in the show's production is a tragedy, as with 5 minutes of thinking, there's so many ways to monetize Mao Mao to keep a loyal and paying audience. There was a game in Mao Mao. There were toys through the monsters of Mao Mao. There were plushes to be made of every character. There's a reason why so many people came together to buy signed posters of Mao Mao. And there's a reason why Parker took a lot of pride in making sure that each signed copy was personalized. There's a reason why throughout this entire video, I've been showing art, all types of art, including fan art credited to the artists who showed appreciation to this show. It is because the show had legs, and its momentum was cut when it could have served as a great asset to the library and lineup of Cartoon Network going into the new decade. There were many stories left untold, like the relationship between Shin Mao and Mao Mao, the relationship Mao Mao has with the rest of his family, how Adorabat lost her leg, which I theorize has something to do with why her mother is no longer around, how Badgerclops lost his arm, and really more about his past in general and how he joined the Thick of Thieves, learning more about Tanya Keys, learning more about the Ruby Pureheart, learning more about Camille and Honey, learning more about Orangusnake's past. I can sit here for another hour and speak about all of this. Beyond myself, there were so many people who cared about the show and still care about the show through any new pieces of information or art that we get from the crew. It was a show that spoke to us all. It was a show that, while I've come to terms with the notion that it won't be coming back anytime soon, I am proud to put it with the rest of my favorite animated shows of all time. Mao Mao, Parker Simmons, the entire crew, speaking for us all, to each and every single one of you. You are a hero. consider gifting me a coffee. I worked on this Rise video for the most part solo, and there's much I couldn't include in this video that'll be in the pinned comment if you want more. Sources are also in the description as well. Big thanks to Nero from Toongrin and Jason Blade for helping me break up me speaking so much in this video here and there. I am so tired. If you'd like to see the rest of my Mao Mao videos, please check them out in this playlist here. Thanks for watching. There were a few cool